once again to Jennifer Rubin, who writes for the Washington Post, one of my most favorite writers, opinion writers. And she's writing about stare decisis. Stare decisis, Latin. And it simply means that those cases that have been decided a long time ago should remain decided. You don't come in with a new set of Supreme Court justices, at least not in modern times, and overturn things that obviously should not be overturned. Now, there are certain rulings that occurred around slavery and immediately after emancipation that had to be overturned. The rulings that the court had in the past, or the court has in the past overturned, were rulings that were obviously on the surface wrong, egregiously wrong, to use Sammy the Fish Alito's term. But a woman's right to privacy is not one of them. And stare decisis is the legal principle of adhering to precedent. And it's not simply a theoretical restraint on the court that is supposed to prevent a certain group of justices, or maybe just one or two who have the deciding vote, from upsetting the law to suit their political minders, the people who put them there. Gee, Jennifer, I wonder if you're referring to the 3 Trump thugs who committed perjury during their confirmation testimony. I believe you are. But Jennifer wants us to know, in its arrogance and in its isolation from everyday life in America, the right-wing radical majority of the Supreme Court seems prepared to blithely sweep away over 50 years of legal history, and with it, the monumental changes in women's lives since the 1970s. Stare decisis is essential to 330 million Americans who have planned their lives with the assumption that half a century of law won't disappear overnight. Well, guess what, truth seekers? Sammy the Fish and the rest of these other 4 thugs, I don't know about John Roberts yet, but these other 4 thugs, they don't give a shit about stare decisis. Are you kidding me? They have been waiting for this moment, a couple of them, since before they were born. And the reality of the upset that every single woman in America now has to face, I don't care if she believes in a woman's right to privacy or not, it doesn't make any difference. Every woman, or any creature, any human creature that contains within her body reproductive organs, will now be affected by this decision, one way or the other. There's no way to avoid it. But that reality was underscored, as Jennifer points out, of all places, at a Pentagon briefing yesterday. And the press corps was there, of course. It was a briefing. And they peppered the spokesman, John Kirby. Seems like a nice guy. He seems a little overwhelmed, doesn't he? But they had questions about what effect the criminalization of abortion would have on the military. Specifically, of course, its female workforce. Even though some of the reporters did not point out that the female spouses of military personnel will be gravely affected too. So, Mr. Kirby, the Pentagon spokesman, was understandably reluctant to weigh in on a draft opinion, right? But the persistence of the female reporters at that briefing put some unavoidable questions to him that he has to answer, or somebody has to answer eventually. For example, if women can't get abortions and life-saving care, in other words, like ending an ectopic pregnancy, will the military now have trouble recruiting women who are especially critical in scientific and cybersecurity functions? And if that's the case, is our national security going to be impaired? Now, the fascist Christians, of course, they want the women, get the fuck out of the military. What are you doing? Get home, go bake cookies and have babies. That's what you're supposed to do. Go run the kids to soccer practice. What the hell are you doing in the military? So this, what appears to be an unintended consequence of this ruling, is, in your humble and obedient servant's opinion here, a very intended consequence. So in response to that question, though, Mr. Kirby made 3 points. First, any social or economic issue in the country will affect the all-volunteer military. He's trying to neutralize the question with, well, anything could affect how many women we have. Number 2, the military takes seriously its obligation to provide medical care to personnel and their families. Well, okay, but if it's illegal. Number 3, women most definitely are essential to our national security. Okay, in other words, Mr. Kirby did not, probably because he could not, I'm not faulting him, could not answer the very specific questions that he was being asked. He couldn't answer. So he comes up with, well, women are definitely essential to our national security. Well, we take seriously our obligation to provide medical care. Which doesn't answer the question, does it, Mr. Kirby? So, as Jennifer points out, it might be news to the gang of 6 sitting in their marble building, but there have been dramatic changes in the lives of women since Roe v. Wade guaranteed the right to abortion. Changes that allowed women to enter the military anywhere in the country, certain that their access to essential care would not depend on the state in which they were stationed. If they knew they might have to hunker down in blue states, would they have joined the military? Would they have stayed in the military? Yes, quoting rather liberally from Jennifer Rubin's column today. But she points out that it might be news to the gang of 6 sitting in the marble building. Obviously, we know who she's referring to, but there have been dramatic changes in the lives of women since Roe v. Wade. Oh, my God. In the 52 years, in the 49 years, 52 years was Kent State, 49 years since Roe v. Wade, the changes that women have endured, a lot of them gratefully, some of them reluctantly, others with a lot of fear and trepidation, but the changes that they have confronted have been profound. There's no question about it. Profound changes since Roe v. Wade. So Jennifer points out that women have relied in hundreds of ways on the right to privacy that was not contingent on their state of residency, where they lived. They chose colleges, took jobs, opened businesses, planned marriages and pregnancies based on a bunch of factors. But might they have chosen differently if the possibility of getting stuck in a state that criminalized abortion was a factor too? That's what's coming. What is it I read yesterday? There are 13 states poised like an itchy trigger finger, poised to, as soon as this ruling by the Supreme Court is made official, kaboom! Women in those states will then be living in a state where if they feel they need an abortion and attempt to get one in their home state, they will be committing a crime. But Jennifer points out that maybe a woman would have prioritized finding a job with a sort of company that would, if necessary, fly her out of state for medical care. Maybe she would have avoided the military because she or her husband could at some point be dropped into a red state that did not recognize women's body autonomy. You know what happens when you're military? When they tell you to move, you've already started the motion. So yes, lives will now be disrupted. There's a good possibility that people might feel the need to quit their job or transfer colleges or relocate their business or physically move because these rat son of a bitches, 5 of them we know of at the Supreme Court with the stroke of a pen, tells women that they were foolish to rely on a legal and social framework that in so many cases has been in effect before these women were even born. And it's a framework that we were all told, weren't we, during the Senate hearings for these son of a bitches, that this was settled law. Stare decisis. You don't go back like Sammy the Fish Alito did yesterday and refer to the 7 justices who voted for a woman's right to privacy in 1973 and call what they did an egregious mistake. Not unless you are an arrogant son of a bitch who feels that you have the power of your Christian God in your hip pocket. That's the only way Sammy the Fish was able to do it. Wow. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com. And never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.